Welcome to the webinar, Get Ready for the Future of HR. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, and then I'll turn things over to our esteemed panel. First, we would like to thank Workday for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Workday. We appreciate you joining us today. We welcome you to stay connected during today's event. For those of you who are active tweeters, please follow us on Twitter at Argyle Exec Forum, and please be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we've curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our member support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you, so please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Following the discussion, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Let's have our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll begin our presentation. Neil, over to you.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you so much for hosting us today. I'm excited for a great session. First and foremost, I want to share our safe harbor statement. As always, we'll be talking about product capability today, and some of those things are in the future. And please make your buying decisions based on current capabilities. I want to take the opportunity to welcome my co-panelists to the stage. We've got two wonderful individuals with us today. First, Josh Bersin, who's principal and founder of the Josh Bersin Company, and also Eddie Raffaelli, who is my esteemed workmate here at Workday and head of our ML machine learning engineering for Workday. Before we kick off, I want to dig in a little bit. Today we're going to be talking about some fairly technical terms and concepts that maybe some of you might not have a clear understanding of. We thought it might be worth describing a couple basic definitions of what machine learning is. I recently read a quick description from IBM stating that machine learning is a branch of artificial intelligence and computer science which focuses on use of data and algorithms to imitate the way humans learn, gradually improving its accuracy. Machine learning is an important component of a growing field of data science, where it's driven by the use of statistical methods. Algorithms are trained to make classifications or predictions and to uncover key insights into data mining projects. I'm going to turn it to you, Eddie, first. Why don't you give us kind of your take on all
Yeah, thanks, Neil. It's great to be here. Machine learning is not a new technology. It's been around since roughly the 1950s, and it's gone through a really rapid maturation in the last 15 to 20 years. At Workday, we've been building and shipping machine learning features for roughly 7 years. When we start to think about machine learning, we take a few different elements into consideration. The data quality and quantity, what data we can get to train our models, our platform approach and automation, what we can automate away. As I'm sure you know, machine learning is just a technically complex field. There's a lot of data engineering and manipulation, experimenting with models. Serving machine learning is computationally very expensive. And our job is really to take all of that complexity and deliver features that make a difference to you every time you use Workday. And then thinking about data privacy and security. So we have technology like federated training and learning that actually we take foundational models and push that last step of training out to the edges where your tenant actually resides in order to not need to re-centralize data and not need to move huge volumes of data.
Excellent. Let's do a quick poll. What I want the audience to see is just how familiar are you with the use of AI and ML for HR and talent experiences? Let's go ahead and take the poll. And we're watching along as you're answering the question, and it's pretty split.
Yeah,
I think some of it is not familiar at all, somewhat familiar. The one that's not surprising to me is very familiar. I think given given this topic, it's not surprising that we're getting the results we're seeing. I'm going to give this just another minute. We've got about 2/3 of our audience has voted. We'll dig in. All right. Looks like majority of our audience has voted, and we're pretty split here. Good, not familiar at all. I'm glad you're here today to listen and learn. Somewhat familiar. We'll give you guys what you need to dig in a little bit more. And the very familiars, the small percentage of you, I hope we can enlighten you. This is super helpful, everyone. We're here to discuss why AI and ML is here to stay. And, as a trending topic that will continue to impact HR for what I think will be years to come. We're in the midst of this really disruptive and in some ways uncertain economic environment that has organizations around the world considering a number of scenarios or possible pivots. One new foundational way of thinking that sets up this topic and discussion today is the emerging need for what our esteemed guest Josh Bersin calls a cohesive, integrated operating infrastructure for HR professionals and teams. There's a lot to unpack here, so I'm really excited about today's conversation from Josh Bersin and Workday's head of engineering, Eddie. Josh, let's thank you for being with us. First and foremost. You recently wrote a powerful article that drilled into the systematic model for HR. You called it the 4 R's framework. Can you first off describe, what this is and why you think it's so important?
Sure. Well, the fundamental sort of challenge we have as HR people is we have dozens and dozens of issues and capabilities and projects and initiatives that we're responsible for. We're responsible for pay, we're responsible for hiring, we're responsible for culture, we're responsible for leadership development, skills development, dealing with diversity, inclusion, creating product work teams, figuring out how to do performance management, figuring out how to do succession. I've spent now 22 years of my life getting involved in HR, and every year there's a whole new domain: work-life balance, hybrid work, well-being. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the way HR has been set up over the years and the way the profession has evolved is most HR professionals focus in one domain. They're recruiters, or they're training people, or they run or maybe they're compensation people, or they do employee relations, or they do employee communications, wherever it may be. And that is a relic, in a sense, of the world where we considered HR to be a cost center. We wanted to minimize the expense of HR. We wanted it to be efficient, and we didn't want to spend too much money on it. Well, that isn't what HR is anymore. Now the HR function is a strategic partner to the CEO and the CFO on every business transformation, every growth initiative, every major problem the company has, because every company is in the people business, not just professional services company and software companies, but virtually all industries have become dependent on talent for a whole variety of reasons. One of which is, of course, that the labor market is just run out of talent, to be honest. Right. So that interconnectedness is really what we call the systemic model of HR. So I'll stop there, Neil, and keep going here.
Yeah, that's some great points, Josh, and I think very, very interesting to look at how this dynamic has changed. I'll ask you, for the audience, everybody's probably heard of an operating model. Yeah. But what's the contrast there between an operating model and what you're introducing as an operating system?
Yeah, so when I first got involved in HR, it was at the beginning of my part of this whole career. Everybody said to me, well, we've got to build COEs. I didn't even know what a COE was. And, we have to have these specialists, and then we're going to have these business partners, and the business partners are going to be generalists, and then they're going to call on the specialists, and they're going to bring them in, and they're going to do these things in concert. And Virtually every HR department set itself up that way. And what they then discovered was that in today's talent climate, where there is a shortage of workers in most roles, not everyone, but most of them, and there's a high degree of turnover, and we have people working part-time and contingent and all sorts of alternative work agreements, those siloed groups didn't perform well. For example, if you think about the tech companies that overhired during the last business cycle, those were talent acquisition teams doing what they were told. They were told, go hire 100 engineers, spend as much money as you can, get them as fast as you can. Nobody went out and talked to those engineering managers and said, why are you hiring them? What do you want them to do? Could there be internal candidates that could do these jobs? Maybe you don't need so many of those people because we have actually resources inside of the company that you're not using. Nobody did that because the talent acquisition group is a single-minded group to just go hire people. Now, if you look back, what the 4R model is about is every time you make a talent decision, there's 4 R's: recruiting, retention, reskilling, and redesign that have to go on at the same time. And the companies that are doing that are finding out that they can be much more efficient and productive and effective at their growth strategies than just throwing it over the recruiting department and say, hey, just go get a bunch of people for us because we need more. So, that's an example of it. And it comes up in virtually every conversation we have. And I think because the economy's kind of slowed down and the labor market is so competitive, it's becoming an essential ingredient. And another example is right now today, Amazon has a walkout going on because their hybrid work strategy was abandoned, and somebody at Amazon, I don't know who, said, you guys are all coming back into the office or you're not going to work here. And the employees said, no, we're not. We're going to leave. And they're walking out. Who owns that problem? The head of DEI, the head of compensation, the head of employee experience? There's a whole bunch of things involved in that problem.
No kidding.
So this is about the HR function operating as more like a professional services organization and less like a 1980s IT department. That's kind of the way when I was working for IBM in the 1980s, I sort of feel like we set up HR a little bit like the way IT used to be many years ago.
Yeah, I think that's very insightful. The recruiting piece for sure, not being just an order taker, but a strategic part of the decision-making process and consultating along the way. Josh, I want to switch gears a little bit. So for this operating system to work, what do you really believe the role of AI and ML?
Well, AI is like, it's funny. Eddie and I talked yesterday about a lot of AI stuff. I mean, AI came along right at the right time to deal with these issues we're having in companies. Because if you want to have systemic solutions to the various talent challenges and growth challenges you have inside of your company, you need data. You need information that's more consistent across the organization. And that's what AI does. The way I think of AI at a very high level is rather than sort of creating a bunch of software and then storing the data from those transactions, AI has its unique ability because of the mathematics to look at this vast amount of data and learn from that data what is going on without a computer programmer telling it everything that it needs to know. And if you think about the challenges you have with retention, engagement, recruiting skills, whatever it may be, it's very hard to address those issues systemically if you don't have a good piece of data about where the problem lies and which part of the problem you need to focus on. And that's where I think AI is going to play a massive, massive role in HR. I think it's going to be a huge benefit to all of us, and we're going to be learning things from the data we have in Workday that we just didn't realize were going on inside our own companies.
Josh, there's concerns on this topic, obviously, in boardrooms, labor unions, coffee break rooms, in just general chatter on social media, that AI is a job killer. What's your perspective on that?
I completely disagree. Every piece of technology that I've been involved in, and I've been around since before the PC was launched, believe it or not, has created a whole bunch of new jobs. There are going to be people that are going to have to build and develop the AI. There's people that are going to have to use and serve and improve the AI, to train it, to figure out how to implement it effectively. to get involved in looking at what the AI is doing, to identify how it can be improved, to create the employee experience correctly around it. There's going to be all sorts of jobs, and those of us that are in creative jobs or IP jobs, we're going to use the AI to do our jobs better. So I see absolutely no threat. Now, if you are one of these people that hates new things and you refuse to get involved in this space, yeah, you're going to get left behind. If you have refused to learn how to use your PC or to learn how to use Excel or PowerPoint or wherever it was, yeah, you suffered. But a year or two from now, these tools are going to be very widely used. It's not going to be so intimidating. And we're just going to be doing work in a much more productive way with much better information. And we also, by the way, have to learn about how much of this we can trust, because these are not perfect systems. They don't make perfect decisions all the time. So that's where the human value add comes in. So I'm not worried about people losing their jobs.
Yeah, I like that perspective. Eddie, let's turn it to you. What are some ways we can think about and position AI in enterprise applications and systems for augmenting human intelligence, helping us to be, call it, more productive?
It's a really interesting challenge in the enterprise space. I think every business has a unique way of operating, and the way that we build ML solutions is really well suited to find, what Josh described as those systemic solutions. Being able to understand the relationships between things that may look disconnected on the surface, like recruiting and your existing talent pool, and where you may be able to identify gaps in your existing skill set, being able to identify new talent to bring on board, successfully onboarding them, and being able to nurture and develop that talent in-house is really well suited for ML. Our approach at Workday is that of trying to make your experience and the things that you do as an employee, as a manager, as an administrator, or as an executive easier and faster. We want to help you make better decisions with better information, all while keeping you in control. Like Josh was talking about, these systems are not deterministic. And having a person in control of the outcomes of our machine learning algorithms is one of our core principles.
Excellent. That's very insightful, Eddie. What about security? What are some of the guardrails for where and how we apply AI and ML?
Yeah, I think because we've been working on machine learning for 7+ years, it's built into the core of Workday. It benefits from all of the security and privacy that comes along with Workday. It's not something that's been kind of bolted onto the side. But on top of that, we use a technique that's common in cybersecurity. It's called defense in depth, meaning multiple layers of protection. Those are policy controls, programmatic controls, cryptographic controls, where we apply a high level of transparency so you can see exactly what data we're using to train what model. You can opt out of specific ML features. And then finally, we take an active role in helping shape policy. Workday is represented on the US government's AI Advisory Council and working with NIST to help develop standards.
Yeah, excellent. Josh, I want to bring this back to you. In a recent blog that you wrote, I think it was titled "An AI-centric HCM system, should help us practice what we call systematic HR." Understanding the role of skills, culture, diversity, pay, and other factors on improvements in hiring, development, internal mobility, job design, productivity, and growth. Wow, that's a lot. Can you tell us more about that? Expound on that topic for me.
Well, I've looked at a lot of systems, Workday and others, and I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs doing pretty interesting things. And one of the things I've learned about HR is for the last couple of decades I've been involved, virtually every decision we make in HR, who to hire, who to promote, how much to pay somebody, who to move into what role, is made on human judgment. We may think we're doing it scientifically. We may think we're using all sorts of data, but at the end of it, there's a lot of judgment going on. So if you look at what these talent intelligence kinds of applications do, you can make yourself a lot smarter about those decisions. A perfect example is skills. Going back to the idea of hiring versus internal mobility. Of course, you want to hire the world's best machine learning guru, to come work in your IT department. That person is not interested in going to work for you if you're a bank or if you're a healthcare provider. They want to go work for a tech company. They want to go work for a university. So you may not be able to get them. Well, it may turn out that if you look at the actual skills you need for that job, somebody with a math degree, maybe a master's degree in math in the marketing department, might have 75% of the skills you need for that job, even though they haven't been trained specifically on ML. So that's a decision you could be making that you wouldn't know exists if you didn't have that information. And that kind of thing's going on all over the company. Who should be moving into this new role in sales? Who should be running the sales organization versus being the sales rep? I mean, these decisions go on all day. I've been involved in many, many of them during my career. And it's always this kind of gut feel that, oh yeah, I think this person's the right one. Well, we're going to get that information. And we're going to have maybe not perfect information, but a lot more, reliable information on how to make those decisions. And I think going back to what I said in the beginning, Neil, I think we're going to be running a lot leaner in companies going forward. It isn't just the financial situations with inflation and the economy, but we really are going to have a shortage of workers in many, many companies. And this kind of information is going to help you drive productivity up without just forcing people to work more hours, which also doesn't pay off either. So I just think this technology is arriving at a perfect point in time when people really are going to need it.
Yeah, that augmentative quality and allowing you to do more with less is so critical, I think. Eddie, I want to take this back to you again. You've heard a lot of what Josh has to offer. How does this translate from a core tech stack perspective?
That's a good question. I think machine learning is really well suited to do things that may look simple on the surface, defaulting the right thing in prompts, helping you skip forms completely, which on their surface may seem small, but when you actually start to add them up at scale, really dramatically transform and impact the amount of time you spend in systems like Workday. But where it gets really exciting is when you start to put together workflows that cut across different teams. We were talking about this a little bit earlier, but imagine scenarios where you're able to analyze the skill sets in your team, identify where you have gaps emerging, being able to identify where you need to go and hire, and then using AI to help you write a job description, get it translated to all of the languages that you need to translate it to, summarize that job description to be sent out to different job boards, help you accelerate the time it takes to find the right candidate, help them onboard successfully, recommend the right learning content, recommend mentors, understand what kinds of questions people ask in their first 30, 60, 90 days and proactively push that content. And then actually be able to understand how their journey at your organization is going using tools like Peakon and NLP or natural language processing to understand sentiment and that employee experience. I think that's where we're going, where we talk about systemic HR and being able to use AI that's pervasive throughout the entire ecosystem to do a better job of understanding from start to finish how your employees are progressing through your organization and helping your team make better decisions, all while keeping you in control. This isn't a place where we replace decision makers. We're actually just trying to give you the ability to make better decisions faster.
Yeah, there's a lot of goodness there. I personally think skills is a fairly easy way to think about how ML supports the talent lifecycle and across all key aspects of the business, as it pertains to people. You can see on the graphic on screen now, really where, that is pervasive throughout, the entire talent lifecycle and the way it's just embedded in everything that we do. So it's a great opportunity. Eddie, we touched on, how we at Workday think about AI and ML, what the difference between a platform approach is versus, an application approach. Can you talk more about that? Talk more about the way that we've built our model?
Yeah, I think what used to happen is, okay, we've got an idea, a feature to build, and we build that from start to finish from scratch. Okay, what data do we need? How do we get that data in a format that's well structured for machine learning? How do we experiment with models? And now we need to actually serve that. And what we've done at Workday is actually just bake that directly into the core of Workday. So of course, we have access to public data sets. We have partnerships with teams that give us access to data that we license. We have data that our customers have contributed for just general purpose use. And then finally, the data that we use specifically from you to train a model for you. The data inside of Workday has been architected to be really well suited to machine learning. We have all of the transactional history, understanding the data lineage about every piece of information that we use for machine learning. That capability lets us build this embedding space, and embedding is simply a way for us to understand the relationship between different documents. And that can be everything from invoices and expenses to people, learning content, KB articles, jobs and gigs, and put that all in a space where we understand kind of the nodes and edges between those and be able to predict where there might be relationships where we as humans can't see that. There's just too much data there. And that's what machine learning really excels at. All of the work that we've done to build that platform in-house is really well suited to do that specifically for the enterprise in a way that respects all of the data privacy and security concerns that come with building enterprise solutions.
You know, that last piece you offered, I think is critical. You know, it's the trust of artificial intelligence. You know, give me some of your thoughts on, you know, what are the critical principles here?
Yeah, I think the potential with AI and machine learning every day seems higher than it was yesterday. I don't think I've seen a space in software move as quickly as we have here in the AI space. That also means that we need to be very thoughtful about not only what kinds of products we build, but how we build them. Our approach has been the same from day one, putting people first, respecting the law, operating with transparency, protecting your data, and shipping features that really match the expectations of what enterprise ready really means. We have an internal ML trust team that we work with. We work with public organizations. We're taking, like I said, an active role in the AI Advisory Council. All of those things together really help us be at the forefront of how we build trustworthy artificial intelligence products.
Yeah, that's all goodness. Trust in the space, I think, is critical, right? You want to have faith in that intelligence and faith that it really is augmenting you, and belief that you can do what you need to do with it. I'm going to ask you one last question, Eddie. What do you see as some of the potential use cases for generative AI for the CHRO?
The space is just red hot. Like Josh said, we spent some time yesterday kind of just geeking out on the technology behind generative AI, and it's so interesting. Despite its roots being from the 1960s, I think generative AI kind of emerged early on in the 1960s, and then took a big leap forward in 2014 with the introduction of generative adversarial networks, or GANs, and then finally just went red hot in the fall with the introduction of ChatGPT, which is based on this concept of transformer architectures. We've been working with generative AI at Workday for some time now. It's in our upcoming semantic search services. It's part of Skills Cloud today. And the space for generative AI has a lot of opportunity, I think, in Workday across domains like writing job descriptions, helping you write learning content, write development plans, understand knowledge base articles, where you have gaps today in your knowledge base articles, what kinds of questions people are asking, proactively suggest the content to write, help get that translated, reviewed by your administration team, and actually published in a much shorter cycle than we see today. That also applies into things like being able to do all the labeling required to help accessibility throughout the platform, summarize security reviews, do things like write extend applications in Workday using natural language, and then I think ultimately give you a completely different way to interact with systems like Workday. Have a conversation with the platform, and it just understands exactly what you're trying to do. I think the space for generative AI inside of Workday is really exciting right now.
You know, we've said for a long time, you know, Workday should anticipate my needs and help me to execute. And I think all that you've just offered is right there. Will help make that come true. I want to ask one last poll question of our audience. You know, how do you see AI and ML being used in your organizations? I'll let you guys jump into that and answer away. Again, it's a bit of a mixed bag here, but I think
Skills.
think
Most people are
crawl.
working on skills projects. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably going to be the one.
and some nothing yet's there. That's disappointing to see, but not too uncommon.
Can I make a comment on the skills thing, Neil? Real
Yeah,
quick?
go
And,
for it, Josh,
Eddie,
please.
I'd love your sort of
Yeah.
thoughts. So one of the things that's different about skills in the AI world than the old world. In the old world, we literally sat down with a book and we defined using sometimes index cards what skills would be assigned to what job descriptions. And that was completely done by judgment, very little data. Basically, the way these skills engines work, like the Workday Skills Cloud, is they are looking for words or phrases that characterize what we would consider to be a skill. The machine doesn't know that it's a skill. It just knows that it's a token that is associated with this person. It's like a metadata attribute of this person. So we can get into skills, assessment skills, definitions, adjacencies of skills, in ways with AI that we could never, ever have done with the old FYI book, if any of you ever used that, to assign competencies to jobs. You know what I'm talking about, Neil, that old thing.
I do, yeah.
So this is a new world. I mean, you're going to discover things about your personal skills and the skills in your organization that you never knew were there. And it's obviously very, very important when companies are going through all these growth and transformation challenges. So I'm not surprised that most of the people here, or half of them, are interested in skills stuff.
Yeah, I think it's a good entry point, right, for getting your organization ready for this key topic. So it's a good one. You know, I want to thank both Eddie and Josh for their time today. This has been super enlightening, fun to hear your points of view, you know, on this world. And I want to offer just some parting thoughts to the audience that's with us. You know, in this world of constant change, you know, today's organizations require, you know, the flexibility to get the right workers into the right positions at the right time. You know, Workday supports traditional and alternative job architectures in a variety of different ways, you know, including, you know, role and position management, job families, job, you know, profiles, gigs, and projects. Within this structure are embedded organizational, managerial, job-specific, and individual competencies and ML-based, you know, Workday Skills Cloud to understand, you know, worker, you know, capabilities, you know, report reskilling strategies to close gaps, you know, suggest internal mobility, you know, opportunities for redeployment of talent, you know, drive behaviors through, you know, performance reviews and assessments, and easily relocate workers in response to change. You know, AI and ML, you know, has to be embedded in your talent lifecycle. I think we've learned today through the dialogue that it's just an imperative. You know, leveraging an ML-based platform approach. You know, HR can take the operational approach, you know, like Josh described, to connect the dots across, you know, previously siloed functions, really getting to that world of systematic HR. So I want to thank you so much, Josh and Eddie, for this incredible conversation. And with that, we're a wrap. Thank you, gentlemen. I much appreciate your time today.
Thanks for that discussion. We do have some time and some questions from the audience. Just as a reminder, audience members can still enter questions, and now we'll review some of the questions that have come in so far. The first question is, what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in deploying AI and ML in their HR practice, and how did they get past it?
Want me to go first?
Yeah.
I don't know that I've seen any massive mistakes, but I'll tell you the mistake that you're likely to make is in the recruiting area. You could get into trouble. You've seen, there's a law that was just passed in New York that's going into effect in July that you as an employer or as a vendor could be sued for biased in hiring for gender, race, or other non-performance definite characteristics, and you have to prove that your technology is not biased. And of course, the EEOC has rules on this too. And I have talked to people that have turned on AI and various vendors' tools, and because they thought they were going to have a more diverse candidate slate, but it didn't actually do that. Because the AI has to be trained, and if the AI is trained on data that is biased, it will tend to have biased recommendations. So that's one, is to look at the recruiting recommendations you're getting from the system carefully, and work with the vendor if it's Workday or somebody else, and make sure that you're using it correctly, because that's a little bit of a black box, and it is a legal kind of issue. And then, of course, the other one is the one that we all know, which is that if you're using generative AI, don't assume that everything it says is 100% correct, and make sure there's some explainability in the system to figure out where these things came from. I don't think too many companies have deployed this internally yet, but when you get access to all the cool things that Workday is working on and other companies, you're going to be doing a lot of generative AI in your job. And I think you just need to look at it and look at it carefully. But I haven't talked to anybody that's had any big problems, to be honest.
Yeah, this doesn't replace human discretion. No. That's such a key thing. Eddie, did you want to add?
No, I think the only other thing I'd add more broadly is just an over expectation on what ML can do for you on day one. It's not a cure-all. It's not going to solve every single problem perfectly. The reliance on quality data over just pure quantity is real. You need to have good quality data that's an input to your models. I think that's one of the big advantages that we've been relying on, is that structured data that's available within Workday to train models where we can expect a certain degree of quality out of the recommendations, anomaly detection, or the text generation that we're doing.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Let's continue with the next question. The next question is, I'm struggling to understand what you mean by an integrated operating system for HR. Can you please elaborate a little on this?
All right. We were supposed to talk about machine learning and stuff, but let me just take 1 minute on this. So imagine, and I've talked to many, many companies, but imagine a manager comes to their local business partner and says, I'm opening a rec for, so-and-so staff of people. Help me go find these people. In a traditional HR operating model, that would go to the recruiting, the talent acquisition department. They would assign a recruiter. The recruiter would start interviewing the hiring manager to figure out what the job is. They would look for the job description. If it wasn't written, they would make sure that it is written, or they'd pick one off the shelf. They'd source it, and they'd go out and look for people. And they may find out that person isn't available, or it takes a long, long time to find them, or the people that are coming in are not really very good fits. So you end up hiring somebody who's not quite what you wanted. In a systemic HR model, that person would be a talent advisor, and they would go to the manager and say, great, I understand you need 5 more people. You're trying to reorganize your group and do all these new things. I got a couple of things I want to ask you first. Have you looked at internal candidates? Are you willing to develop some internal candidates for that job? Because we have a lot of people in the company that are in groups that are shrinking that would like to come over and work for you. That conversation. Oh, by the way, why are you hiring 5 people? Because 5 people just quit last month. Well, maybe there's a problem of why they're quitting. Maybe there's something going on in your retention area that you maybe think about first before we replace those people. And let's get into that conversation, which could be dozens and dozens of things. And then the final conversation that needs to happen is, there's only so much headcount to go around in this company. I'm not in charge of your headcount, but those 5 heads that you want to hire are coming out of another group that also wants to hire people. Why don't we figure out how to make your organization more effective? Maybe it's performance management, maybe it's org design, maybe it's leadership, maybe it's productivity tools. Maybe you only need 3. Nobody has that conversation. I mean, the business partners should be having that conversation and bringing these different issues from these different specialties from the HR department together. And that is totally doable if you think about your HR organization as a dynamic team of people, not a bunch of specialists responsible for metrics in their specialty area.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how close could we be to having Workday AI summarize 360 feedback in a construction and improvement focused communication?
I think from a technology perspective, that's short term on the horizon. Text summarization is a very tractable problem. Yeah, Neil, I don't know if you want to add anything specifically on the product strategy side.
I like the essence of the question. I think the whole idea of generative AI and performance is a touchy subject, right? Because it's one of those areas where, you know, I think you want to have very thoughtful, hands-on, dialogue between the employee and manager. So I think we'll tread lightly on that. I think you'll see, text summarization and those types of things pop into the platform, in other areas probably first. Performance is a touchy place to be going with generative AI right in the gate.
You bring up a great point. I think if you use ChatGPT or any of these tools that are pretty widely available today, you've seen some of the issues where some of these models can hallucinate, give you information that isn't actually there, and that tolerance for hallucination is very low in the enterprise space. And so I think we spend a lot of time thinking about the kinds of products that we build and are pretty thoughtful about where we roll that technology out.
Yeah, I have another slightly different perspective from you guys because I don't work for Workday. So Workday is going to probably go slow and not productize this until it's completely tested and completely proven. But the chances are somebody in your company is going to take all this feedback and throw it into ChatGPT anyway and summarize it. And I'll give you my experience doing this. We took all of our research over the last month or two, which is 60, 70,000 pages of research, and we put it into an OpenAI system that we built, and we are using it to ask questions of the research, and it is really, really doing a good job. So I actually think outside of the Workday product strategy, that idea is a really good idea, and you probably should play around with it just to see if it does what you want. So given the limitations of performance issues and using it for performance, but I think it probably would do a reasonably good job of summarizing those 360s.
Yeah, good point, Josh.
This next question is sort of detailed. It says, ChatGPT today does a decent job giving me a guide to do something in Workday that I can try out in Sandbox. How close could we be to having an assistant in Workday that can give us this kind of ad hoc guidance, maybe even based on our specific deployment? This is an incremental step that ignores the big picture, but low-hanging fruit with a lot of upside for HR productivity. Any thoughts on that?
Eddie, you want
I
to go
bet
first?
we all three of us have thoughts on this.
I just talked to Eddie about this yesterday.
I think it's an inevitable future that something like that exists. The question is around the timeline. What we've seen in AI and ML is that kind of the first 90% you can move through pretty quickly of a problem, and that last 10% can take quite a while to solve. Whether that's the uniqueness of how a tenant is configured for you versus another company, or the complexity in actually being able to take natural language and translate it to actions within Workday with a very, very high degree of accuracy. 95% accuracy may not actually be good enough. And solving those last few points of percentage is very hard. We see that today in technology like self-driving. The last kind of 1 or 2% of self-driving is proving to be much more difficult than originally anticipated.
Eddie, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of Workday clients that have taken Workday documentation and they put it on the web, how to do this, how to do that. I mean, I've seen it all over the place, trying to make tools easier for their employees. I have to believe somebody's going to point ChatGPT at that documentation and all of a sudden there's a new version of the Workday Assistant. What is your thoughts on that kind of stuff, which I think clients are probably going to do on their own?
Just as a peek under the hood, we've been working, kind of experimenting with technology like that, and being able to take exactly what we were just talking about, natural language, translate that to our own internal query language, which is able to interact with Workday, invoke our security model, perform actions, and being able to interact with that the same way you would with any conversational assistant. Ask it, what candidates that I have in my pipeline for a senior management role in Canada, and actually get that data. And I think the next step is to actually be able to act on that information. Okay, let's schedule them for interviews sometime between Tuesday and Thursday. And I think that back and forth is the direction that we will end up at some point. But there's a lot of complexity to solve in that journey.
Thank you. And the next question is, how do you see HR practice changing over the next 2 to 3 years?
Well, the sort of the mantra that we've been using and the crusade we've been on is what we call full stack HR, which is that if you're a specialist in some domain of HR, learn about the adjacent domains so you can be even more useful and more impactful in the decisions and the designs that you make. I mean, HR is it's like software engineering. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of subdomains in HR. And we all know the pieces of it that we did, maybe the most in our careers. And when we learn these other things, we become better at what we're doing because they're also interconnected. And I think there's a lot of analogy to this in software engineering. If I only know how to do one thing, I'm probably less useful to Eddie than if I know how to do 10 things and I can make better decisions on how to design a system. Same thing's true in HR. All of these sort of people-related problems we have are so interconnected. That's my number one thing, I think, for HR professionals is learn about as many domains and take a different assignment, work in a different group, work around the world. I mean, you learn so much about these different domains of HR by just being exposed to different situations. That's really, to me, critical.
I think is that concept of vertical integration. We see that in different hardware and software companies in the industry. The ones that have that vertical integration, and I think the same concept applies to HR, gives you such an indispensable amount of expertise across multiple domains. And I think AI and ML help make that a very tractable and approachable problem for people. It helps surface up those patterns that are otherwise invisible to people. It helps you see or basically extrapolate the signal from the noise in adjacent teams to be able to apply that expertise in ways that previously just wasn't possible.
I want to layer in here too. I'm excited about the potential, to be honest with you. I was at an event here in DC, earlier today speaking, and a lot of what I'm continuing to hear is manual paper processes, legacy this, legacy that. And, for those, on the maturity curve that may be, more in that immature space today, I think this is going to offer the potential to radically mature. And for those higher on the curve, sky's the limit in my book. So I think there's tremendous opportunity here.
Great. Thank you, Josh, Neil, and Eddie, for this insightful session. This concludes today's webinar, and I want to thank everyone for joining us for this excellent virtual event. And thank you again to our partner, Workday, and enjoy the rest of your day.